Part 3, Heroes and Inhabitants. Hey, welcome back, and thanks for tuning in to UnMasked for our third and final part of our primer on the DC Comics universe. So far in this primer, we've already covered the makeup of the multiverse, along with the physical planes that these characters inhabit. But here we finally get to the fun stuff, and what will be the core of what we focus on throughout this series: the heroes and villains that inhabit this universe. Every other week we'll be bringing you new videos exploring the histories of these beloved characters. But before we get to that, we figured it would be a good idea to give you a general idea of just what these characters are capable of, and how they came to have these amazing and at times terrifying powers. So, let's get started. First up, aliens. As we've already stated in the past two videos, the DC Universe is rife with alien worlds and inhabitants, and many of these aliens turn out to be both heroes and villains. Being an alien with a completely different genetic makeup often affords these characters crazy powers that to us would seem impossible. Such an example of this would be the Martian Manhunter, aka J'onn J'onzz. Being from Mars, his genetic makeup allows him to fly, shapeshift, become invisible, phase through solid objects, see through solid objects, use telepathy, telekinesis, have super strength, and project beams of energy through his eyes. Man, that's a mouthful. Now Superman, aka Clark Kent, also seems to have most of the same abilities, what with his flight, super strength, X-ray vision, and laser beam eyes. And on top of that, he's also got freeze breath. Plus, he's also an alien. So, does that mean he and Martian Manhunter have the exact same abilities? Well, yes and no. Part of the problem is that Superman's abilities have changed many times over the years, along with the explanation for him having them. But here we're just going to focus on the most popular theory. Looking at Superman and his abilities is often said that the only reason Superman has these abilities is because he is on Earth. His home planet Krypton orbited a red sun and had a stronger field of gravity. Supposedly the yellow sun of our solar system acts as a battery, charging many of his abilities, while the lesser force of gravity allows him to fly while on Earth. Now he can also fly in space without protective gear, but once again we'll put that down to his ability to absorb the energy from our yellow sun. Anyway, getting back to the point we're trying to make is that while the aliens' genetic makeup may give them powers, sometimes those powers only manifest because of their environment, such as a Kryptonian living in a solar system with a yellow sun. Now, some of these alien races seem to be overpowered, and to use a bit of gamer speak, broken. And in many situations this is true. Now, you'd think that this would mean that their adventures would be boring. Sure, they have these awesome powers, but where's the danger, the excitement? If there is not a chance for our hero losing, what's the point in reading the story? The stakes need to be high, and our heroes need to have vulnerabilities. So while these aliens have amazing abilities, they also have some crippling weaknesses. These include J'onn's weakness to fire and Superman's weakness to kryptonite that keep them from being gods. Other examples of heroes and villains that derive their power from their alien bloodline include Starfire, a Tamaranian, Lobo, a Sarnian, Chameleon Boy, a Durlan, and the Wonder Twins, Zan and Jaina, who are Exorans. Obviously, there are other alien races in the DC Universe, but we'll get to them in later episodes as they come up. In our next section, we'll look at the various ways humans can make themselves into superheroes and villains by employing strict physical training, calculating intellect, and adaptive technology. The second way people become heroes and villains is through skill, intelligence, and technology. That is to say that DC is home to a bunch of self-made heroes and villains. These people have no special or superhuman powers, but have trained hard and cultivated or come across the kind of technology that would allow them to outsmart, outmaneuver, or overpower their opponents. The best examples of this would be Batman and most of his allies and villains. For the most part, Bruce Wayne is literally just a guy in a bat costume. but by training both his mind and body, as well as having the wealth in order to keep him armed with the latest tech, Bruce has made the Batman a force to be reckoned with. Can Batman physically overpower Superman? Hell no! But he's a brilliant strategist, smart enough to keep some kryptonite on hand in order to level the playing field. As I said, most of Batman's allies also follow this formula of being highly skilled, intelligent, and well-armed humans. This includes Robin, Nightwing, Batgirl, Batwoman, Huntress, and his sometimes ally, sometimes enemy, Catwoman, just to name a few. But obviously not Superman. Another example of a skill-based hero is Green Arrow, aka Oliver Queen. His first-class skills as an archer, paired with his physical prowess and intelligence, make him more than just some dude with a bow and arrow, and allow him to take on some of the toughest opponents. His array of trick arrows that he often designs himself are pretty impressive. Well, except when they're not. Still, you have to admit you can't argue with his logic. Unfortunately, we should put it out there that the main reason these guys are successful as vigilantes is their wealth. Bows, arrows, batarangs, grappling hooks, cool hideouts, personalized armor, and vehicles. This stuff don't come cheap. So luckily both Bruce Wayne and Oliver Queen have vast fortunes to help finance the crusade for justice. But that's not to say that all skilled fighters need money. But it certainly helps. And some skilled fighters use their talents to pay the bills for their armory, such as the mercenary Deathstroke, who has racked up quite the fortune through taking on assassinations and other messy jobs. This, of course, opens us up to the other side of the coin, to look at the various supervillains that also have no superhuman abilities or powers, such as the Joker, Scarecrow, the Penguin, and Bane. Instead, many of them are simply criminal masterminds, playing to their strengths. Both the Joker and Scarecrow have detailed knowledge of chemicals, allowing them to make their own weapons, whether it be Scarecrow's fear gas or the Joker's toxin. Now granted, in some iterations, the Joker is said to have an immunity to some poisons, thanks to his dip in a vat of toxic chemicals. But it did not afford him any super strength or any other superhuman abilities, so we're not counting it. Meanwhile, the Penguin, who is definitely not the greatest of fighters, has a knack for influencing others, and an array of weaponized trick umbrellas to help him get out of any jams. As for Bane, he technically doesn't have superpowers, but his access to the drug Venom temporarily enhances his already impressive strength into the realm of what would be considered superhuman. But because this is only a temporary thing, we still consider him a non-superpowered villain. Now, while these characters use some technology, it's not their main go-to, as it is for such heroes as the Ted Kord and Amy Reis versions of the Blue Beetle character. When inventor Ted Kord was the Blue Beetle, he used an array of self-made gadgets to fight crime, while Amy Reis got his power from the Scarab, known as the Khaji-Da, an advanced piece of alien technology. But behind both gadgets and alien tech was a regular dude. Moving on, the hero Cyborg, aka Victor Stone, would also be considered a technology-based hero, though in this case the technology has literally become part of him, as damaged parts of his body were replaced with mechanical ones. This transformation has given him many abilities, including super strength, speed, stamina, and flight. But these things are only possible because of the technology he possesses. Other examples of technology-based heroes include the computer hacker Oracle, the gadgeteer villain and sometimes anti-hero Anarchy, and the industrial supervillain Lex Luthor. Meanwhile, the hero, Booster Gold, is also just human, but having come from the future and bringing some of the technological advances found there with him, he has been able to make a name for himself as a modern-day hero. Next up, we continue with the character Booster Gold, and how his brand of crime fighting opens us up to the field of time travel. We'll also discuss the existence and pitfalls of the robotic heroes and villains found in DC Comics. Having brought up the hero from the future, Booster Gold, we obviously can't talk about him without talking about time travel, which is yet another branch of technology heavily used in DC Comics. For the most part, time travel is in the realm of scientific advancement. That is, it is brought about through the study and use of quantum mechanics, also known as temporal mechanics. Speedsters, like the various incarnations of the Flash, are also capable of time travel, but that is through their connection with the Speed Force, which we'll talk about a little later when we wrestle with the subject of metahumans. Anyway, that's not to exclude some magical heroes and beings from employing their own form of time travel, but for this we'll just focus on the regular people accessing this ability. So who invented time travel? Well, according to the post-crisis universe, that would be the adventurer Rip Hunter. Once again, just a regular guy. Granted, he's super smart, but still human. However, we should point out at this time that Rip being from a distant future means that time travel doesn't come about until many years in the future, as the technology just isn't there in present day. But once time travel exists, we know that it can affect any time period, so that's not really an issue. So how does Rip do it? Being one of the leading scientists in temporal mechanics, Rip designed 2 different devices that would allow him and others to travel back and forth through time. The first being the time sphere, also known as the time bubble. This small craft can travel to basically any time and place with only a few limitations, which we'll get into at a later date. Later, an individualized time pack would also be built from the records of the time sphere, allowing the individual wearing the pack to time travel on their own. Now, for those of you watching DC's Legends of Tomorrow, you're probably wondering why I haven't mentioned the ship Rip Hunter uses, called the Wave Rider. Well, the reason for that is that it didn't exist until now. Or at least not in this way. If you think back to our first video on the multiverse, you might remember our section on Vanishing Point and the Linear Men, which listed among its members a man named Matthew Ryder, whose code name was Wave Rider. That's right, Rip's ship is actually named for a character. But this is probably just an Easter egg put there for the fans and has no real connection to the character Matthew Ryder. As for why they have a ship instead of a time sphere, well, it probably has to do with the fact that they need room for at least 8 people, and the sphere couldn't handle that. However, you can see a version of the time sphere in CW's The Flash during the end of Season 1 as the Reverse Flash uses it in an attempt to return to his own time. Now, obviously time travel can be super risky, with small changes causing a huge ripple effect, as we saw in the events of 0 Hour, Crisis in Time, and Flashpoint. So this technology needs to be handled with care. Finally, in this grouping, we have heroes that are purely technology. I'm talking about robots and artificial intelligence. No, not that one, I mean. There we go, much better. Anyway, these heroes and villains are completely man-made. Though some might also possess some alien technology, or even a human soul, these characters are built, not born. Being an artificial intelligence/robot has a lot of perks, as they are usually made of physically stronger stuff than humans. They can also be given many abilities through the programs and technology installed in them. Another possible perk would be that these guys are super hard to kill. Not only can they take a licking and keep on ticking, but often when their robotic body is destroyed, their AI consciousness can be sent somewhere else, or is backed up into another robot body just waiting to be activated. Examples of such characters are the heroes Shaolin Robot, Red Tornado, Our Man, and the Metal Man, as well as the villains Amazo and Brainiac. Moving on to our next group of heroes and villains, we'll look at those who have inherited their abilities through their possession of a metagene that has turned them into a superpowered metahuman, so stay tuned. Now, Marvel Comics made the term mutant popular with their series The X-Men, who are normal humans who through genetic evolution develop strange and fantastic abilities. Well, DC has their share of such characters too. But for legal reasons, they've decided to call these beings metahumans. In the comics, the term metahumans was coined by an alien race known as the Dominators, who were the ones to discover that some humans possessed a biological variant, which they called a metagene, that under the right conditions would lead to the manifestation of some incredible powers. So what was needed to happen for this metagene to activate? Well, to put it bluntly, trauma. An inciting incident where the person possessing the metagene would experience an extraordinary amount of physiological stress would act as a catalyst for the metagene, which would trigger a change in the individual's biology. That is, these genes were basically ticking time bombs, just lying in wait for the right set of circumstances to go off. One of the best examples of this is the creation of each version of the Flash. But for this video, let's just focus on the Jay Garrick version. It was originally said he gained his powers after he inhaled heavy water vapors, but it was later revealed that the water vapors didn't give him powers, but activated a latent metagene, unlocking this potential within. Now this seems to be the case with most of the speedsters, including Barry Allen and Wally West, while others, like Jessie Quick, gets her powers through a serum, and Bart Allen possibly gets his speedster powers through genetics, i.e. being Barry's descendant. Anyway, I just want to briefly talk about just what the power of a speedster really means. These people just aren't super fast, but are capable of tapping into the Speed Force. The Speed Force is kind of hard to describe, but I'm gonna try. The Speed Force is a well of energy that the select few can tap into. Kind of similar to the Force in Star Wars that the Jedi and Sith can access, the Speed Force grants a slew of abilities, including super speed, super endurance, decelerated aging, increased perceptions, accelerated healing, phasing through solid objects, vortex creation, and supercharged brain activity, which allows speedsters to quickly absorb information, though retaining it for any period of time can be a bit of a problem. But while the Speed Force offers these powers to those who tap into it, it can also overtake people, having at one time absorbed Barry Allen during the Crisis on Infinite Earth storyline. In turn, the Speed Force itself is absorbed by speedsters in order for them to use their powers. However, absorbing too much while making you godlike for a time will soon kill you. Finally, the last note about speedsters is on their connection with time travel. As I said before, other than people possessing either a time sphere/time pack, or possessing magical powers connected with time, speedsters are the only other people capable of time travel. Getting back to latent metagenes being activated, another example of this phenomenon is with Black Canary, aka Dinah Lance, who in the New 52 continuity comes into her powers when her metagene is triggered by the intense stress and emotions brought on by seeing her husband shot and supposedly killed. Another character known to have a metagene, though at this point we're not sure if it's something he was born with or if it was triggered, is the hero Vibe, aka Cisco Ramon. However, in the CW TV version of The Flash, it appears that metagenes are triggered by the particle accelerator explosion that happened at the beginning of the series. Now that's not to say that people can't be born with their metagenes already activated, though we will admit it's a rare occurrence. One of the few examples we can come up with where the character possesses the metahuman powers from birth is the Batman villain Killer Croc, aka Waylon Jones. Born with a form of regressive atavism, an evolutionary throwback to a basic species, in this case reptiles, Waylon displayed physically reptilian traits from birth that only became more apparent as he aged. This gave him thick scales that could act like armor, amazing strength, and an almost enhanced ability to hold his breath underwater. However, the fact that Waylon was born like this is only due to the metagene he possessed that was triggered in the womb. We'd like to point out that how the metagene has spread through the human race was greatly affected by the interference of another alien race, the White Martians. Mentioned in our last video, having caused the genocide of the Green Martians, the White Martians, who also found the metagene present in primitive humans, began to experiment on these poor people. These experiments altered the metagene to the point that while at one point humans might have all evolved to possess the metagene, now only a select few would inherit it. However, metagenes aren't the only cause of metahumans within the DC Universe, as the more common causes are experimentation and accidents. In our next section, we will further explain the differences between these types of metahumans and those who possess a metagene. We will also take a quick look at the alternative species found on Earth that fall into the category of being a metahuman. When we talk about accidental metahumans, we often mean metahumans who have interacted with some foreign object or substance that has changed them on a genetic level. An example of this would be the origins of the hero Beast Boy, aka Garfield Logan, who has also gone by the name Changeling. As a child, Garfield contracted a rare disease called Sakutia, which is lethal to every species except for the West African green monkey. His scientist parents were developing reverse evolution to bring back extinct creatures, and in order to save him, used an untested serum to transform Garfield into a West African green monkey for 24 hours, in order to destroy the virus. Sounds ridiculous, I know, but people will go to strange lengths to save their kids. Anyway, while the serum did save his life, it also turned Garfield's skin and hair green, and gave him the ability to transform into any animal he has seen, thus creating the hero Beast Boy. Here we can see that his superpowers were given to him when an unknown and dangerous compound was introduced into his bloodstream, and not by a metagene he already had. Now, some might argue that being given the compound was the inciting incident that would activate a metagene, but at this point it's unclear. Kind of like the whole what came first, the chicken or the egg sort of thing. But in this case, the question is, did he have a metagene that activated, giving him superpowers? Or did the compound his parents gave him create metagenes inside his body? Many other heroes and villains have appeared to have gained superpowers in this fashion, by being introduced to some foreign element, either intentionally or unintentionally, that changes their genetic makeup. These people are metahumans, but do not possess the metagene. Examples of other characters who have undergone a change from human to metahuman are the heroes Firestorm, Terra, and Geoforce, as well as the villains Poison Ivy, Clayface, and Livewire, just to name a few. Now, also technically included in the category of metahumans are races found on Earth that aren't exactly human. One example of this would be the Atlanteans. Now, in our previous video, we mentioned that the people of the sunken Atlantis were able to adapt to their new watery environment by ingesting a serum that altered their genetic makeup. Now, while this change starts off as one brought on by a foreign element, this particular event happened hundreds, if not thousands of years ago. And since then, these abilities have manifested in the new generation by being passed on genetically. So the current ruler of Atlantis, Arthur Curry, aka Aquaman, has these traits due to his Atlantean parentage. Though one might also point out that in more recent incarnations, Arthur is only half Atlantean, with his father being a human. But we'll get to that in another video. Other examples of non-human races of metahumans found on Earth include Northwind, a Featherin, the diminutive bat-riding Elvarens, and arguably the super simians of Gorilla City, who possess superhuman intelligence. And yes, we know they're not humans, but they might as well be, what with being much smarter than a good percentage of the human population. Finally, we should say that often individuals, like Superman and Wonder Woman, who belong to other categories in this video, have been called metahumans. However, this is only when the term is used as a catch-all phrase for anyone with superhuman abilities, no matter what those origins for those powers might be. In our next section, we will move into the realm of the gods, as we discuss the many characters who get their powers from gods and cosmic beings, by either being the offspring of them or being gods and cosmic beings themselves. Now, before we fully get into our next section, where we will discuss the characters who derive their powers from their metaphysical status of being a cosmic being or god, we need to address a type of hero whose gifts fall between the lines of being genetic and being metaphysical. This being the realm of demigods, with the most obvious of the examples being Hercules, part mortal, part god. Having both a mortal and a deity for parents often results in the inheritance of some amazing powers, though is often coupled with the sting of a mortal lifespan. Now, while this might be seen as a rare occurrence, we'd like to point out the history of mythology's worst offender, Hercules' own father, Zeus. Seriously, this god could never keep it in his pants. Women, men, hell, he'd turn himself into an animal if it meant he might get some action. Needless to say, this would occasionally result in demigod children. In the DC Universe, one example of this would be Cassandra, better known as Cassie, Sandsmark, the second person to be known by the name Wonder Girl. Cassie has a mortal mother, Helena Sandsmark, and the Greek god Zeus for a father, giving her the gifts of superhuman strength, speed, durability, reflexes, and the ability to fly. Though these gifts are technically genetic, having those genes be given to her by a deity puts her partly in the realm of the gods herself. A few more examples of demigods found in the DC Universe are the villains Circe and Lycus, as well as Wonder Woman's mother, Hippolyta, and the sometimes hero, sometimes villain, Lilith Clay. Moving fully into the realm of gods, magic, and religion, our next group of heroes derive their superpowers from these three sources. But before we get into that, we should probably give you a general overview on how religion and cosmic beings/gods work within the DC Universe. First off, it should be said that in the DC Universe, no one religion has precedence over another. In the metaphysical realm of Skyland, we see that basically all the pantheons of ancient gods exist: Greek, Egyptian, Chinese, Celtic, etc., while Judeo-Christian representations of religion can be found in both the heaven and hell realms, where both angels and demons can be found. Some might also argue that the presence, or source, who sometimes takes the form of a portly old gentleman and is said to be the creative force behind all life, is within the DC Universe a representation of a monotheistic god. But overall, DC shies away from saying that one particular religion is correct by saying every religion is correct. All the gods, demons, and their minions exist. This allows them to just have fun with all the amazing concepts and characters that can be derived from the world's religions and mythologies. Now, while most of the religions we just mentioned can be found in our own history and mythology texts, DC has also developed a few that are specific to their own universe. So let's take a look at a couple of these pantheons and other cosmic entities. First up are the denizens of New Genesis, known as the New Gods. These beings, while seeming human, actually have evolved beyond mere mortals due to their close proximity to the source/presence, that all-powerful creative force we just mentioned. These new gods are basically immortal, seeming to stop aging around the appearance of 30, and should they remain uninjured in battle, can live for thousands of years. They also have an impressive amount of superpowers, including the standard super strength, reflexes, and stamina, along with general invulnerability, immunity, and an individual ability that is unique to each god. But while these beings are technically gods, they are not immune to death, as they have a weakness to the substance called radion, and can be killed in battle by a strong enough opponent. Another pantheon found within the DC Universe is the Endless, a group of cosmic siblings: Destiny, Death, Dream, also known as Morpheus, Desire, Destruction, Despair, and Delirium, who was once known as Delight. They hold sway over a couple different realms, including Dream and Nightmare, among others. Like the new gods, these beings are immortal, but can be killed. However, it seems that should they die, a new version of them will come into being. The Endless were part of the Vertigo line of comics, and therefore have only had a few run-ins with the heroes found in the DC Universe. But now that they, along with other Vertigo properties and characters, have been brought under the DC Multiverse banner, we may be seeing more interactions between the Endless and DC heroes in the future. However, interestingly enough, one of the 7 siblings has actually shown up several times in the DC Universe, just not in her usual getup. That, of course, would be the character of Death, who is the physical personification of the cosmic force of death. It has been retconned within the last couple decades that she has taken on many forms in order to carry out her job of ending lives. She shows up as Azraeus, the apocalyptic god of death and member of the Four Horsemen, as well as the Black Flash, which is the Grim Reaper for speedsters like the Flash. She also appears as the Black Racer, who represents death to the new gods, and as Necron, the Lord of the Unliving, who represents death on the emotional electromagnetic spectrum, which affects the members of the Green Lantern Corps. Now, while she is in these roles, she is often seen as an antagonist, but her persona as one of the Endless is actually that of a very friendly and cheerful young woman. So it's interesting to see these two sides of death, one as the villain and one as the bringer of solace. Now, as for the 52 monitors we mentioned in our first video, one for each Earth within the multiverse, not counting the Overmonitor, in recent comic events have not only culled their numbers, but have introduced a new and terrifying cosmic force. In the pages of the book Multiversity, we see Nyx Wotan, supposedly the last monitor within the multiverse, having to gather heroes from all the 52 Earths to help fight against a new horror known as the Gentry. The Gentry is not one person or creature, but a group of seemingly Lovecraftian horrors, working together for the shadowy figure known simply as the Empty Hand. Very little is known about these new villains, but there are strong hints that, at the very least, the Gentry have a strong connection to our own Earth, Earth 33, namely that we may be the ones responsible for the Gentry's creation, which, with being the world that produces DC Comics, is technically true. Still, the concept is a little hard to wrap your head around. But enough about the Gentry and the Monitors. Let's move on to the heroes and villains affected by these deities, by focusing on the Blessed, Avatars and Elementals, along with the Lords of Order and Chaos. Probably the most famous character to derive their power from the ancient gods is Wonder Woman and the Amazons. Now, while in some versions Wonder Woman is believed to be a demigod, much like Wonder Girl, Cassie Sandsmark, it was actually revealed that she was formed from clay by the Queen of the Amazons, Hippolyta. She was then imbued and brought to life with the attributes of the Greek gods by the goddess Athena to be as beautiful as Aphrodite, wise as Athena, swifter than Hermes, and stronger than Hercules. While her training among the Amazons gave her limited telepathy, profound scientific knowledge, and the ability to speak every language known to man and beyond. The Amazons themselves also have received blessings and powers from the gods, including extended lifespans and incredible strength, but we'll get more into them when we discuss Wonder Woman in full. Two other important examples of characters deriving their powers from the gods include Deadman, aka Boston Brand, and the Spectre. Technically dead, Brand's spirit was given the power to possess any living thing by the Hindu goddess Ramakrishna, which would allow him to track down the man who killed him and to help Brand atone for his own sins in hopes of racking up some good karma. Meanwhile, the Spectre is actually one of the aspects of the Presence, specifically its vengeance. However, this aspect needs a human host, resulting in the characters Jim Corrigan, Hal Jordan, and Crispus Allen to take on the powers of the Spectre, acting as its avatar. And no, we're not talking about blue-skinned cat people. Thanks a lot, James Cameron. Now, while all these outside forces have powers, Earth itself also possesses a power. And no, I'm not talking about Captain Planet, though that would be cool. Instead, these living spirits of the Earth can be divided into 5 groups, known as the Green, the Red, the Gray, the Clear, also known as the Blue, and the Black, sometimes called the Rot. The Green is the consciousness and life force of the planet and its plant life. Beings known as elementals are connected to the Green, and can not only tap into the Green as a power source and control plants, but can sense changes within it. Characters who can access the Green include Swamp Thing, Poison Ivy, and the second version of Black Orchid. The Red, which is similar to the Green, but instead of being the energy forces of plant life, represents the energy of living animals, humans, and alien races. Red elementals include individuals like Wildcat/Yolanda of the Convergent storyline, Beast Boy, and Animal Man, who can tap into the red and sense disturbances in the life forces of others. Meanwhile, the gray is actually a collective fungal consciousness, who, unlike the green, whose will is to be in harmony, the gray is driven to take over, consuming their hosts, making them into a type of hive mind. Luckily, elementals of the green have been able to keep the powers of the gray at bay. Champions and avatars of the gray have included Solomon Grundy, and more recently, the character Miki, whose gender changes with the bodies he/she takes over. The clear or blue is the force of the world's oceans and waterways. People able to tap into the clear can often use hydrokinesis and communicate with aquatic life, putting our resident king of the oceans, Aquaman, in the position of a representative of the clear. Others connected with the clear/blue include Naiad and Azathoth of Earth 2. Finally, the black, the force also known as the rot, is tied to death and decay. Those bound to the black become avatars of death, with the members of the arcane family, including Anton, William, and Abigail, being their most well-known agents. Now, each of these groups, save for the gray, have what is known as a parliament. The green has the parliament of trees, the red the parliament of limbs, the clear the parliament of waves, and the black the parliament of decay. These parliaments are groups made up of former elementals who have moved past being a warrior for their element. Often they lose their human or alien form, becoming one with their element, and act as councils for the current elementals to receive guidance or orders from. Now you'll probably notice that some of these names I've already mentioned, those being Poison Ivy, Beast Boy, and Aquaman. The truth is that these three elementals came into their powers by different means. That is, they were humans changed by some sort of accident or experiment, i.e. making them metahumans, or in the case of Aquaman, being born into an Atlantean heritage, before becoming elementals. The powers that they received allowed them some insight into their respective elements, and in turn have made them into the representatives of their particular element. Moving on, the forces of order and chaos, just like liberals and conservatives, have butted heads from the beginning of time, but have needed physical proxies to act for them, which led to the creation of the Lords of Order and Chaos. Two complementary groups of supernatural entities, the Lords of Order and Chaos hold godlike magical powers, and have been retconned a few times into the histories of such characters as Amethyst, Princess of Gemworld, Dr. Fate, the Phantom Stranger, and Hawk and Dove, either by being made a lord or agent of order or chaos. However, it should be noted at this point there is also a third group of sorts that acts as balancers to these two opposing forces, which include such characters as the Hector Hall version of Dr. Fate and the heroine Equinox. Notable Lords of Order include Nabu, who empowered and occasionally possessed Dr. Fate's helmet, Shazam, the wizard who gave Billy Bastion the power to become Captain Marvel, and Amethyst, Princess of Gemworld. Notable agents of these Lords of Order include Captain Marvel, Dove, and Kid Eternity, who originally worked with the Lords of Chaos, but then later defected. My guess is that the Lords of Chaos had a crappy dental plan. Moving on, notable Lords of Chaos included the supervillain Mordu, Clarion the Witch Boy, and T'Char, while their notable agents include Dr. Chaos, Kestrel, and Hawk, who received his powers from T'Char. Next up, we'll move further into the realm of the occult, as we discuss heroes and villains who come from demonic and magical origins. Now, so far, we've seen how a character might derive powers from gods or other elemental forces. But what about demonic forces? Well, while most demons and the offspring of demons are categorized as evil, they have also been counted among the ranks of DC heroes. Two examples of this would be the Teen Titan Raven and the demon Etrigan. Raven, daughter of the interdimensional demon Trigon and an Azarathian human woman named Arella, whom he raped, Raven grew up in the alternate dimension of Azarath. There she was taught to keep a tight hold on her emotions, otherwise the demonic powers given to her by her father might overtake her. She displays sorceress-like abilities, along with empathic ones. But to be honest, at this point in our research, it's hard to say if these powers we see her use are from Trigon or from her training in Azarath. Throughout the storylines that feature Raven, Trigon has often tried to woo his daughter over to the dark side with the promise of power, and perhaps cookies. But while Raven does possess demonic powers, she continues to fight on the side of good. Continuing with our tales of dysfunctional families, we have Etrigan, who along with being the son of the demon Baal, is also the half-brother of the legendary wizard Merlin. During the time of Camelot and the reign of Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, Etrigan, who is a full demon, was summoned by Merlin, who attempted to gain Etrigan's secrets and knowledge. While Merlin failed, he bound the demon to a knight of King Arthur's court, Jason Blood. This has made Jason immortal, allowing him to live up till present day, where he and Etrigan, who share the same body, work as a demonologist. The discovery of and recitation of an ancient poem allows Blood to change into Etrigan, and the two surprisingly work in tandem with the heroes of the Justice League, when the circumstances call for it, that is. One thing that we should take away from the tale of Etrigan is that it also brings to light the fact that many historical and mythological figures, such as the wizard Merlin, who in this universe is a half-demon, and the sorceress Morgan Le Fay, who is half-fae, while not being gods, do exist. Speaking of wizards and sorceresses, let's get down to the other big magic users of the DC Universe. First off, we have the Homo Magi of the Hidden City, which we mentioned in our last video. Now, technically the Homo Magi are considered a sub-race, having evolved in a parallel but separate line among Homo sapiens, giving them a natural ability to wield magic. That's not to say that regular humans can't do magic, but Homo Magi have a natural affinity for it. But more on that in just a bit. The most prominent members of the Homo Magi in the DC Universe would be the heroes Giovanni John Zatara and his daughter Zatanna. As Homo Magi, they both display amazing aptitude for magic, though backwards incantations are needed in order to perform their spells. Considered to be some of the strongest magic users in the DC Universe, the true extent of their powers are not yet known. Other Homo Magi of note include Madame Xanadu, Tracy 13, and the evil Atlantean exile Gamine. Moving on to non-Homo Magi magic users, we have John Constantine, aka Hellblazer. We should note that while Constantine has two similar but separate incarnations, one in the DC Universe and one in the Vertigo publications, we will only be focusing on his DC Universe powers for this primer, though we will explore both origins during our videos specifically about him. In the DC Universe, Constantine is presented as an occult detective from Liverpool, England, who learned magic from Nick Necro, who in turn had been taught by Zatara and Baron Winters. Along with Nick, Constantine also studied and fell in love with Zatanna, which only further enhanced his understanding of magic, giving him the abilities of divination, illusion, demon summoning, pyrokinesis, teleportation, and invisibility, just to name a few, thus proving that you don't have to be a Homo Magi or demigod to swing some serious magic. And while some people are taught magic like Constantine, others access mystical powers through magical items, such as the hero Vixen, aka Mari McCabe, who uses her Tantu totem to channel the powers of the animal kingdom. Others use secret words of power, such as Billy Baston, who by speaking the word Shazam can transform himself into Earth's mightiest mortal, Captain Marvel. However, this power must be first bestowed upon you by a true magic user, like the wizard Shazam. Finally, the last group of heroes we are going to examine are those who derive their powers from emotional manifestations. Yes, we are finally talking about the Lantern Corps. So be sure to stay tuned. As stated before in our last episode discussing fictional geography, the various lantern groups are cosmic organizations fighting for peace or chaos and domination in the universe. But where do these lanterns get their powers from? Well, each division of the Lantern Corps represents one of 7 different cosmic entities that have been around since the dawn of the universe. In turn, these 7 entities each represent a single emotion and bear different forms. Ion, the first of them, took the form of a whale or fish and represents willpower. Parallax, a parasitic entity that represents fear, took the form of a large insectoid creature. The Butcher, who represents rage, took the form of a demonic bull. Ophidian, who represents greed, portrays itself as a large serpent. Adara, a large 3-faced bird, represents hope, while the Proselyte, who represents compassion, took the form of a squid-like creature. And finally, the Predator, that represents love, appears as a skeletal, draconic-like figure. By learning how to unlock the power of these entities, the immortal guardians of the universe that inhabit Oa were able to create the Green Lantern Corps, as they tapped into the immense power of Ion. Through the use of the power rings that store the green energy of Ion, along with their own willpower, members of the Green Lantern Corps can generate hard light constructs in any shape or size, the only limit being their willpower and the imagination of the individual. Overall, it sounds pretty powerful, but without the initial power of Ion, the rings are useless. So the members must charge their rings periodically with their own special lanterns, or even return to Oa, where the main power battery is stored. But as we said before, the Green Lantern Corps are just the most well-known group of these 7 entities. And while we mentioned the others during our other videos on fictional geography, let's quickly run them down once more for anybody who's having trouble keeping up. The Red Lanterns use rage and violence to fuel their power by tapping into the aspect of the Butcher. The Orange Lanterns, aka Agent Orange, who represent Ophidian, receive their power from greed. Meanwhile, the Yellow Lantern Corps, aka the Sinestro Corps, who are the main antagonists of the Green Lanterns, follow Parallax and use the fear of their enemies as their weapon. The Blue Lantern Corps follows Adara and uses hope as their power source, while the Proselyte, the entity of compassion, doesn't exactly have a Lantern Corps, but a group known as the Indigo Tribe, who instead of rings use staffs in their mission to help disseminate their message. Finally, we have the Star Sapphires, who being connected with the Predator use the ultimate embodiment of love, but have nothing to temper it with, which can emphasize the aggressive and obsessive nature of love. Some people don't know when to let go. Now, all of these different Lantern Corps and the Indigo Tribe are capable of flight, thanks to their power sources, and almost all of them can create hard light constructs, minus the Red Lanterns, who instead display the worst case of bad breath, emitting napalm-like plasma from their mouths. It should also be noted that the Indigo Tribe is capable of some limited teleportation, because, they want to be special. Later down the road, the Black Lantern Corps are introduced, which use the reanimated corpses of fallen heroes and villains as their members. Because what's better than a zombie apocalypse? A super zombie apocalypse! But with these jokers coming out of the woodwork, they eventually set into motion the creation of the White Lanterns, who would eventually beat them down. But we'll get to that at a later video. So there you have it. These are most of the ways the heroes and villains of the DC Universe attain the superpowers that make their adventures so freaking cool. Now, I'm sure we've probably missed a couple, but we're pretty certain that any other characters can probably fall into one of the several categories we've just outlined. Anyway, we hope that this video has made the world of DC Comics a little easier to understand. In our last section of this video, before we get to our first official episode, we'd like to explain just how we're going to divide and present this information to you in these videos. So what can you expect from our upcoming videos? First off, while many of these characters are seen in other mediums, such as movies, TV shows, cartoons, and video games, we're going to focus mainly on the comic book canon. So while we'll mention releases of movies, TV shows, and other media based on these characters, we will only give a minimal description of said media. That is, unless it has a profound impact on the DC Universe, such as the 1990s Batman animated series being the medium where the popular character Harley Quinn was created/introduced. Given the 4 eras of comics, gold, silver, bronze, and modern, this is generally how we will break down our videos, as we follow the chronology of when the character was published. For example, the character Superman, who originated the superhero comic books, will have at least 4 sections to his video. One for the Golden Age, one for the Silver Age, one for the Bronze Age, and one for the Modern Age. Possibly 2, as it spans 30 years of history, compared to the average 15 of the previous ages. Now, this is obviously a lot of information to fit into one video. So with characters who have long histories, like Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, we'll be breaking down this information into 2 or 3 videos. However, this isn't to say that every character will get multiple videos, or even the same amount of time dedicated to them. They may not even have a video all to themselves. Characters with a long list of published titles, like Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, will get the multi-part longer video treatment, while newer or less popular characters will get less screen time, as there's just not as much information, such with characters as Stephanie Brown, aka Spoiler, and Garfield Logan, aka Beast Boy/Changeling of the Teen Titans. The other thing that needs to be said for our videos is that when we look at a superhero, we'll be examining it through the lens of that hero's civilian identity. To demonstrate, let's look at the character of the Flash. Throughout the years, the identity of the Flash has changed during the different ages or through the passing of the torch by the death of the previous Flash. For example, in the Golden Age, the civilian identity of the Flash is Jay Garrick. But in the Silver Age, a new Flash is introduced, with Barry Allen. So, instead of going through every version of the Flash in one video, we will have one video dedicated to Jay Garrick and a separate video for Barry Allen, and so on. Also, while we will try to keep our videos just to the characters specified in that episode title, the truth is that you can't talk about these heroes without talking about their allies and villains. So when we talk about Batman, we're going to talk about Robin and the Joker, but only so much as to give their significance to Batman's story. But needless to say, there's going to be some overlap of information. Finally, we'd like to point out that the order that our videos come out in will be grouped by superhero families. So to start off, we'll be dealing with a series of videos called The Guardians and Ghouls of Gotham, where we'll be looking into the group of heroes and villains that first got me into DC Comics, the Batman family. In the first part of this series of videos, we'll be covering the history of Bruce Wayne, Dick Grayson, Kate Kane, along with the different iterations of Robin, Batgirl, and Batman's other important allies. While the second part will focus on Batman's gallery of rogues, including the Joker, the Riddler, Two-Face, and Poison Ivy, just to name a few. As we move into our second series of videos, we'll start to look at Oliver Queen, aka Green Arrow, and his allies and villains, and so on and so forth. We hope that this makes everything clear for you, but if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the comments section. Once again, thanks for watching, and we hope to see you tune in for our first official episode of UnMasked, Bruce Wayne. Remember, be awesome to one another, and be sure to hit subscribe.